Hello everyone and welcome to my first book review in over 5 years, if you don't count my ranking videos. If you guys saw my ranking video that I did this year, my book ranking video, I talked about a series of Spider-Man middle grade graphic novels, Miles Morales Spider-Man specifically, written by Justin Reynolds. In that ranking, I briefly talked about Around the Spider-Verse, which was number 5 on my ranking. It's an anthology book. This is the third book in this series, and I mentioned that I was going to make a video talking about all 3 books and going more into it. So the first book in this series, I guess it's a series. Again, the third book is different, but the first book is Miles Morales Shockwaves. So this graphic novel was written by Justin Reynolds and illustrated by Pablo Leon. And it is a graphic novel that is about Miles Morales, of course. There's actually multiple Marvel middle grade graphic novels. There's a bunch of graphic novels about various characters in the Marvel Universe. You got Black Panther, there's Miss Marvel, Captain America, but of course, no, you know me, I'm interested in the Spider-Man ones. And for those of you who are wondering, no, these books do not take place in the main 616 Marvel Universe. And one of the big things immediately that tells you that is that Miles states in this book that he's only been Spider-Man for nearly a year. So, for those of you who don't know, Miles Morales in the comics got his powers when he was like 13 years old, and he had them for a couple years. That was back when he was in his own separate universe from Peter Parker, and Peter Parker was dead in that universe. So in this book, you have Miles Morales as Spider-Man, but you also have Peter Parker as Spider-Man, which means obviously this can't take place in the main comic universe, because he's been Spider-Man for nearly a year, but also Peter Parker is also Spider-Man, so it just doesn't line up with that universe. So all of these graphic novels, middle grade graphic novels that are based on Marvel characters, are set in their own universe. So I just find it interesting that there's a whole nother universe that is like middle grade books of Marvel characters. And actually, if you look, they actually have sneak peeks for other books that are set in this universe. Like there's a Miss Marvel sneak peek on the back of the Shockwaves book. So I find that interesting. Now regarding Shockwaves, I think by far the biggest strength about this book is that you have Justin Reynolds writing, which he's really good with humor, and that's something I'll say with the other books too, is that just the way he writes characters and the way they interact with each other, the banter they have with each other, it's really funny and it's cute, and that's a big strength of this book. And that combined with another strength is Pablo Leon's artwork. Absolutely beautiful when it comes to the Shockwaves book. So that is a major plus, is that the writing combined with the artwork, it's great. It is absolutely beautiful. It's amazing. There's also 2 girl antagonists in this book. Like they're like partners in crime, and they're villains that have powers that Miles encounters throughout this book. And I also enjoy their banter with one another. It's funny because they're like partners in crime, but they argue with each other, and that adds to, that's a good dynamic that I enjoy, is that even though they're partners in crime, they work together. It's like they don't get along and they argue and they're like, why didn't you teleport us away or whatever? And it's like, well, that's not how my powers work. Like I said, for the most part, writing is good, the character interactions and the artwork is beautiful. However, the one downside I will say about this book is that the villain sucks. The villain is this like really forgettable generic bad guy number 2554, it's just a generic bad guy. Basically, an earthquake happens in Puerto Rico, where Miles' mom, Rio, is from. And so there's a relief effort that's being done. But then there's like this generic bad guy, like Mr. Granderson, I think his name is, where he's trying to like harness the power of a rock that it's found after this earthquake in Puerto Rico. And he uses it to power up, to have superpowered individuals, which explains the girls that I mentioned, the partners in crime, they get their powers from this rock. And also one of the characters' dad he gets powers from this bad guy, again, really generic bad guy, completely forgettable. And so, yeah, that's by far the worst aspect of this book, is the villain. He's forgettable. He's just trying to use this rock to give people superpowers and to form like this army, I guess, of superpowered individuals, bad guys. Other than that, I really enjoyed this book. Shockwaves is, like I said, is a beautiful book. It's funny. It's enjoyable for the most part. So if you can get past like the villain, it's great. So I'm gonna give Miles Morales Shockwaves a 7.5 out of 10. Something that I do really like about this book that was appealing to me was that it goes back to more like classic Spider-Man. It has that classic Spider-Man feel. It's a book that doesn't have like super high stakes, you know? It goes back to that classic Spider-Man feeling, like Miles is trying to balance his life, like he's trying to be an artist in this book, but also live up to his responsibilities as Spider-Man. It's just Miles, you know, trying to help his friends, also trying to balance, you know, his life as Miles Morales and Spider-Man. That's something that I like. Now, one of the reasons why I enjoyed this book as much as I did, not only is it funny and you know, obviously all the things I mentioned, but also I read this book right after reading a really bad Spider-Man story arc in the comics. If you're wondering, this is the book that I read right before reading Shockwaves. It's the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man story in the comics. Yeah, this was really bad. I loathed reading this comic, and so reading the Miles Morales Shockwave book right after this probably had something to do with why I enjoyed it this so much. You know, I don't want to go off on a rant, but like this was awful, and it's a prime example of why I don't like modern Spider-Man comics. If this is a sign to come, this is like written by Joe Kelly, like this is the start of Joe Kelly's run on The Amazing Spider-Man. If this is a sign to come, oh boy, I want off this train, you know? It's just a prime example of like why, you know, they don't know what to do with Peter Parker as Spider-Man anymore. And it's actually why the current Miles Morales Spider-Man comics are so much better. So that has something to do with it. It's like when I'm reading 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, and then I read Shockwaves, it's like a massive difference in quality. It's almost like reading 8 Deaths of Spider-Man is like reading, like, it's like I ate poop. And then I read Shockwaves. It's like Shockwaves is broccoli, but, you know, obviously broccoli, no matter how you feel about it, I'd rather eat broccoli than poop. So it's like broccoli, even though it's broccoli, after eating poop, the broccoli is going to taste like candy to me. So keep that in mind. It's like, I don't think Shockwaves is like the most amazing Spider-Man story, because it's not. But after reading what I read, it's amazing. So now on to the second book, Miles Morales, Stranger Tides. Unfortunately, this book is the worst, and it's nowhere near as good as the other two. And the reason for that is, first of all, I will say, just like the first book, Justin Reynolds excels at comedy and the interactions between characters. I like Genki trying to help Miles and being the guy in the chair, and their interactions and the way they talk to each other is funny. And that's another highlight of this book. Unfortunately, pretty much every other aspect of this book is just not as, it's a downgrade from the first book. Including the artwork, which was very surprising for me. This book is also illustrated by Pablo Leon, but the puzzling thing is that the artwork is a very major downgrade. And I was confused at first, because it's like, it's the same artist. Well, how is this possible? Then I come to find out that actually there was multiple artists for this second book. Whereas with Shockwaves, it's just Pablo Leon doing the illustrations. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe Pablo Leon didn't have the time to do all the artwork for the second book, because this second book was only released a year after the first book. Maybe that has something to do with it, I don't know. But either way, it's just kind of unfortunate, because it's just, not only is the artwork in general just not as appealing as the first book, but there's actually a panel that I saw that was just very puzzling and didn't match the moment. What I mean is, I'll put a picture up, but basically this is the panel I'm talking about. So for context, in this book, the main villain, the Stranger, has the power to freeze people. A bunch of people in this book end up being frozen, and Miles's uncle Arron ends up being frozen while he's driving. And so as a result, he remains in critical condition throughout this book. This is the moment where Miles's parents are telling him, hey, Uncle Arron was frozen, you know, he's in critical condition. And this is kind of Miles's reaction to that. And I just thought that this expression is so just weird and goofy looking, and doesn't really match the moment. It doesn't really convey properly Miles's like shock and like sadness. Just you know what I'm talking about if you look at the image. So just in general, the artwork, not only do you have that one panel I mentioned, it's just not as visually appealing as Shockwave. Shockwave's was beautiful with its artwork. Very, very stylistic. But this one, with all the different artists, illustrators on this book, it just didn't, I guess it didn't mix well. Then you have another aspect of this book that I did not like, and similar to the first book, it's the villain. Now, in the case of the second book, the villain is not like a generic bad guy, you know, person, but it's the Stranger is, to my knowledge, looked it up. The Stranger is an actual Marvel Comics villain. I'm not familiar with the Stranger at all, so, you know, please correct me in the comments, like, if you think that I'm wrong with what I'm saying about the Stranger. But it seems to me, just based on his portrayal in this book, it almost seems like he is a complete ripoff of Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. Their motivations are exactly the same. They want to, you know, get rid of half of the population so that there can be resources for everyone. That's exactly what Thanos' motivation was. That's what the Stranger tries to do with his freezing powers thing, is that he freezes half of the population of what, Brooklyn or whatever. I don't know if it's Brooklyn or the world, whatever. But he freezes half the population. Non-lethal, like he's not killing these people, he's just freezing them. And then, you know, so it can be equal distribution of resources. Again, Thanos. If I'm wrong about this, if this is how the Stranger is portrayed in the comics, please correct me. But it just seems like they took the Stranger and just kind of made him like Thanos in this book. Very weird, so that's why I don't like the villain, the Stranger, because it was too distracting it was just an obvious ripoff to me. But other than that, you do have the girl antagonists, the partners in crime that I mentioned, back in this book. They have a sort of arc in this book too. And again, I enjoyed seeing them again. It's funny. And in general, like I said, I know I criticized this book, but it's not bad. I don't think Stranger Tides is like so much worse than the first book. It's really just the artwork that's my main criticism. Like, it's just a downgrade, and it also has a bad villain for different reasons, but it stands out as the worst of the three books. Enjoyed it. Again, it's still funny. It's still, the artwork is not bad. It's just a downgrade, that's it. Although something I did want to mention about the cover of this book is that I don't even think the cover is very good. Like, I like the cover for Shockwaves. I think it's a great cover. It's a wraparound cover. And this is you know, trying to be a wraparound cover like the first book. But if you look, if you look at the background, it just kind of seems like almost copy and pasted. Even the cover kind of seems lazy to me. Very weird, but again, did not hate this book. I'm gonna give Miles Morales Stranger Tides a 6 out of 10. And now, of course, you have the book that I talked about in the last video, and that is Around the Spider-Verse. Of course, this is the anthology book of the series. Not only does this have Miles Morales featured in one of the 3 stories, but it also has Anya Corazon and Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman or Ghost Spider or Spider-Gwen, whatever you want to call her. This is an anthology book. Justin Reynolds writes the Miles Morales story, which is the 2nd story in this. Pablo Leon does come back, but he's actually not illustrating the Miles Morales story, but rather the Anya Corazon story, and he also writes the Anya Corazon story. So let's start. I'm going to talk about each of the stories in order. So first, with the Anya Corazon story, you have Kraven the Hunter as the villain, and something that I liked about this particular story, not only is, again, it's funny, the artwork is beautiful, superb again, like the first Miles book, but also I like that they take the villain characters, Kraven and Kraven's daughter, and they actually relate it to Anya and her relationship with her dad. So it's an interesting little way of showing that, you know, the villains have family trauma, and that can actually relate to the hero drama of this story. Like Anya's dad sees Kraven and the problems he's having with his daughter, and sort of kind of makes him think about his relationship with his daughter. So I thought that was clever, you know, using the villains to show how the heroes are making mistakes. Right off the bat, I think that's something that Around the Spider-Verse improves upon, is the villains. So that's a major plus, because you have all of the great stuff I mentioned about the previous 2 books, except, you know, the artwork is better and they improve the villains. So that is great. The second story is, of course, like I said, the Miles Morales story, and this one was by far, in terms of comedy, the funniest, because there's just so many jokes that I liked. And again, you have the banter between Miles and Genki. They go to a museum for a class field trip, and Miles is like late, and Genki, they were supposed to do homework. Genki does the homework. Miles, of course, being busy with Spider-Man, doesn't have time to do the homework. So Genki's like, well, you know, if you'd know what we were doing if you did the homework. And so Miles is trying to stop the bad guy, which is Mysterio in this case, which I love that they used Mysterio in this story. And something really great about the fact that they use Mysterio in this book is that, or in the Miles Morales story, is that the Miles story is illustrated by Penelope Gallord, and her artwork is beautiful, and it actually strengthens the use of Mysterio in this story, because Mysterio is a really cool looking villain, always been one of my favorite Spider-Man villains in terms of like the visual look. Fishbowl head, you know, cool cape, you know, green smoke, awesome. I love Mysterio. And so because, you know, the artwork is so beautiful in this story, it just makes Mysterio look like 10 times cooler. So I enjoyed that. And again, the comedy in this story is great. I mean, like, Mysterio uses like a giant hamster for an illusion. It's funny, and again, the stuff with Genki is like, you know, basically doing the hard work for Miles, as he just does like the punches and kicks to fight Mysterio and the illusions. There's also a joke that I really liked, where as soon as Miles shows up in his Spider-Man outfit and like Spider-Man's here, you have like one of the other kids be like, wow, Spider-Man, and then he's like, I wonder how he washes his hands in the costume, which was such a random joke, but, you know, comes out of nowhere. Funny. That's basically really all I have to say about this the Miles story here, is that, again, it brings back the banter I liked about the first book. Mysterio's cool, and it's just by far the funniest story in the book. And then you have the last story in this book, which is, of course, the Ghost Spider story with Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman. This story is written by Roseanne Brown and illustrated by Maka Gill, I believe. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, my apologies. I really liked this story, and even though the humor is not as strong, I think it's the most interesting in terms of story, just like the concept that intrigued me the most. And it kind of has to do with my thoughts on Spider-Gwen as a character in general. The thing is, I think Spider-Gwen is a very hit or miss in terms of the comics. Something I don't like about the Spider-Gwen character is that it just seems like they do so much multiverse stuff with her, and when they really don't need to. I mean, like, Gwen's universe, Earth 65, is a very interesting concept because it pretty much takes a bunch of Spider-Man characters, completely changes them. You know, Peter Parker dies, Peter Parker becomes the Lizard in this universe, and then dies. And of course, Gwen Stacy is Spider-Woman, and then she's also in a band with Mary Jane and Betty Brant and Glory Grant, called the Mary Janes. Gwen's father, Captain still a police captain, but that stuff is interesting. Like, that's the stuff that I want to know more of and delve into when it comes to the Spider-Gwen character. I want to learn more about her universe and those characters. But it seems like Marvel, it just like always does like the multiverse thing with Spider-Gwen, where it's like, you know, you see her in Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon and all these other, you know, multiverse story arcs. And it's like, that's not what makes Spider-Gwen interesting to me. I don't care to see Spider-Gwen interact with other Spider people and like go over to the main universe and interact with Peter Parker, who's Spider-Man in that universe. I don't like those stories. It's just kind of a waste, in my opinion. Like, you have all these interesting concepts, yet Marvel feels the need to like have her involved with the multiverse. This story in Around the Spider-Verse does not do that. Thank you. That's what really was appealing to me about this story. They show a bit of an origin story when it comes to, you know, Gwen Stacy meeting Mary Jane when they were kids in like elementary school, and they become friends. Then years later, Peter becomes the Lizard and then dies in a battle. And then, you know, they have the funeral. And that's another thing. I want to say, like, these three books, like I said, they're middle grade books. They're, you know, not targeted towards the same demographic as the comic books. But something that surprised me about the Spider-Gwen story is that it's actually kind of dark, and it takes concepts like, for example, the villain. They use the Jackal as the villain in the Spider-Gwen story. Miles Warren, who in the comics, in the main 616 comics, like back in like the 60s and 70s, Miles Warren, who was Peter and Gwen's college professor, he has a creepy love obsession with Gwen Stacy, and it leads to him cloning Gwen Stacy after she dies at the hands of the Green Goblin, and, you know, it starts the whole clone saga thing. Not going to get into it. I don't want to turn this into a rant, but basically Miles Warren has a creepy obsession with Gwen Stacy, and that's actually something that they do in the Spider-Gwen story in this book, which again surprised me because it's a bit of a weird story to tell for a younger demographic. But Miles Warren becomes the Jackal. He like injects himself with some sort of, there's some sort of experiment. He turns into a Jackal and has a creepy love obsession with Gwen Stacy in this book. And it's not like I don't think kids could read this. They do poke fun at it in this story. They do make jokes about it. So I don't think it's not anything too extreme. It's just something that did surprise me. But yeah, I think the thing that I enjoyed about this book is that it focuses on Gwen's universe. It's nothing to do with the multiverse. You know, she's having problems with Mary Jane because, like, she's always having to go off and do stuff as Spider-Woman. Her responsibilities, again, similar to Miles in the other books. And she just, a lot of the time, she just doesn't have time to practice with the band, and Mary Jane gets upset about this, and then they have this little journey where near the end of the book they kind of understand each other more. And yeah, that's what's interesting about this story is I enjoy these characters, and I enjoy the dynamic and the concepts that it gives us. No multiverse stuff. It's refreshing, and I think that's kind of the word I would use to describe these middle grade Spider-Man books, is that these stories are just refreshing to read, you know? If you guys are not familiar with me, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I'm a nerd. I've read countless amounts of Spider-Man comic books up there. I'm very familiar with the character, and I know so many different stories. And so reading these books was refreshing to me because it goes back to like a simpler time that I enjoy with Spider-Man comics. I like the 60s comics. I love 70s, 80s era Spider-Man comics. These middle grade graphic novels kind of give you like a updated look at a classic Spider-Man, you know? It doesn't, you know, when you read the 60s and 70s comics, the dialogue, you know, is like 60s and 70s era vocabulary and way of talking, so the dialogue hasn't aged well, but they're still well-written stories, and that with these middle grade graphic novels you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the stories, the classic stories that I like, where it's just, you know, Miles in this case trying to balance his life with being Spider-Man, but it's for like a, you know, new generation. So I have to give these books a lot of credit, you know. I'm glad that I chose to read them and add them to my ranking last minute. Around the Spider-Verse, all three stories, this is surprisingly really good. Pretty much all on the same level for me, quality-wise, these stories. I think the Shockwaves book in general is better than the Miles story that's in Around the Spider-Verse. So in that respect, I almost want to say Shockwaves is the best. But honestly, I mean, it doesn't matter. These books are good. I enjoyed all of them. I'd recommend them. If you have a young kid who's into Spider-Man, I'd recommend them. You know, again, even for someone like me who's read like a bunch of Spider-Man comics, you know, older than the demographic these books are aimed for, obviously. Look at me. But, you know, even me being a big Spider-Man nerd, I enjoyed them. If I had to give a rating to Around the Spider-Verse, maybe an 8 out of 10, honestly. Yeah, 8.5, probably around there. I don't know if there's plans for more Spider-Man middle grade graphic novels. I don't know if Justin Reynolds plans on making more Miles books, or if they plan on making a book with Spider-Gwen or whatever, or making another anthology book. But either way, I'd welcome that. I'd be interested in reading more of these books. Yeah, I just say keep up the feel of these books. Good humor, just that classic Spider-Man feel that I mentioned. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good night.